inception and likely will be throughout Campaign 2000 and beyond.
Crossfire is Campaign Headquarters 2000. As simple as that.
From here to Election Day, it's Crossfire on CNN.
I'm watching you, CNN.
As we reported earlier, today marks the 30th anniversary of the Kent State shootings. One of the students injured was Dean Kaler, shot in the back and paralyzed while walking to class. Dean Kaler now teaches history and government, and he joins us from Kent, Ohio this morning. Good morning, Mr. Kaler.
Good morning, Carol.
You were not one of the demonstrators. What do you remember about what happened that morning?
Well, I remember very vividly the events that morning, the bullhorns of the students talking about the issues of communism and socialism and capitalism. I remember the tear gas. I remember the gas mask. I remember the chaos and the students running around Taylor Hall. And I remember running around Taylor Hall as I was escaping from the gas. And then I remember the National Guard gathering on the practice football field behind us here. And I remember them huddling. And when they started marching towards the top of the hill again, I sort of followed along, staying what I thought was a safe distance of around 100 yards or so. And when they reached the top of the hill, they turned and fired. And when they were turning and firing, I said, "Oh my God, they're shooting. Why are they shooting?" And then the bullets were, hitting the ground around me. And there was no place to hide at this point behind a tree or anything. And I just jumped on the ground, covered my head, and prayed that I would not get shot. I was shot, and then I was praying then I wouldn't get shot again. And then after the shooting, it was the screams and the tormented voices of the students that I heard. And last but not least, lying on the ground looking up and seeing the students' faces, the shock, the disbelief was just unbelievable.
Mr. Kaler, some Kent State students have been quoted in different newspapers as saying that, when they think of your memories, they say, why do people keep chewing on it? Can't we move forward? Many of the students there on campus don't want to be remembered for this shooting. What is your sense of that when you hear students today talking about that fateful day for you years ago?
Well, I think that's the legacy that Richard Nixon and Spiro Agnew, Governor Rhodes, and that generation of politicians who were using the divide and conquer theory of politics. They did a real good job of using the hate speech of the time, or rhetoric as we used to call it.
You mean making of a more cynical generation today, Mr. Kaler? Do you see that in your own high school students?
Yes, I see that in my own high school students, but I also see, students who are very caring and compassionate about that. And I don't think that's the majority of students who think it should just go away and we should forget about it, because their parents, and many of them now, their grandparents, who are my generation of students back then, who are raising those people.
Mr. Kaler.
And yes,
Mr. Kaler, I was wondering,
so
you talk about forgetting. It raises a question of forgiving. You actually met the National Guardsman who fired that shot that paralyzed you. Have you forgiven him?
Well, I don't know if I met the exact one, but I'm sure I did, because I've met all the ones who pulled the trigger that day. And the faith that I belong to is the Church of the Brethren, and one of the major tenets of their faith is that we need to forgive. Forgiveness is something that I work on a regular basis, and coming back here each year helps me to renew that forgiveness and gives me an understanding of where I should be going and what I should be doing with my life as well.
Dean Kaler, you've already done a lot with your life, elected office and now a teacher of young people. Thank you so much for joining us on this 30th anniversary of the Kent State shootings. Early Edition will be right back after this quick break. A song. Overnight, dozens remembered it in a candlelight vigil on the campus of Kent State University. 30 years ago today, Ohio National Guardsmen fired on a student protest over Vietnam. And when it was over, 4 students lay dead, 9 others. The shooting stunned the nation and galvanized the anti-war movement. One who lived through it found himself caught between his own political beliefs and duty to the school. CNN's Ed Garston now with one man's legacy of Kent State.
Well, what surprised the Guard, and this came out the Scranton hearings, was the intensity of the student reaction to the guard with the heavy...
Sociology professor Jerry Lewis says he'll never stop telling the story of what happened on the Kent State campus 30 years ago today.
There's a little bit of rock throwing, and couple guardsmen are hit that time, but just as they get to the top of the hill, everybody's getting out of the way. Why? Because of the bayonets.
For the last 25 years, Lewis and another professor have team-taught a course on the tragedy. It's the least he can do, says Lewis, for the 4 students who were shot to death by the National Guard.
As scholars, that's the best tribute we can give to the 4 students, is to get the facts right.
Well, getting the facts right has consumed Lewis almost from the moment the first shots were fired. Though the young activist assistant professor opposed the Vietnam War, he could not join in the demonstration because he served as a faculty marshal to keep the students calm. Lewis never got the chance. He says guardsmen ordered the marshals to leave the area for their own protection before they could speak to the students.
I have what's called survivor's guilt, sure, and it's tough to be out here right now. I wish we could have moved sooner to talk to the students, and it always bothers me.
It is Lewis's personal connection with the shootings that attracts today's students to his course.
Professor Lewis has been very emotionally dedicated to the course. He brings a completely new aspect to it, something that I've never had in another course before.
Lewis admits his life and work is in danger of being defined by his obsession with retelling the story of the shootings.
I've always worried that I'm Jerry Kent State Lewis, and I don't say that flippantly because I've published in several other areas.
Lewis says it's his duty to continue to teach the lessons of that day, but the anniversaries are difficult for him to endure because he cannot answer the one question: why?
At 12:24, I go to the 4 sites and I say goodbye to the students. And then I'll come to the rally. I stay here at the rally. And when the rally's over, I go back to the site and just sit there, sometimes for an hour. And then I go home and hug my wife.
Ed Garston, CNN, Kent, Ohio.
One of the students injured that day was Bobby Stamps. He was running across campus when a bullet struck him. State this morning, and he joins us now live. Robbie, we thank you for taking time to talk to us this morning. Let me ask you this on this day. Does a day go by in your life where you don't think or talk about this event?
I think so. It did happen 30 years after all. I mean, that's not to say that it has not affected me profoundly, because it has, but it's also not to say that I don't always think about it on a daily basis, because that's not true either.
What do you feel like when you think about that?
Well, I have mixed emotions. When we get together on the 4th like this, I have a chance to see friends whom I haven't seen in many years, the other wounded students, the families of the dead students. So there's something very special about that, but it also can be painful.
It'll be special today. It'll be special today, no doubt. As I understand it, this is the first time that all 9 of you who are wounded will be assembled with the families today at Kent State. Is that true?
That's correct, and we'll all be having breakfast together in just a few minutes.
What is that going to be like, do you think?
Well, it's great to see them, and particularly because all the other 8 of them, and I've seen most of them, are doing really well, living their lives to the fullest, in good health, and that's very satisfying.
I know you still feel pain from what happened that day, but in the years hence, have you come to some sort of peace with what happened? Can you forgive the government or those who actually shot you? Can you understand why it all happened?
Forgive, yes. Can I understand why it happened? No, because 30 years after the fact, we're still waiting to know what happened. And just like people who may have been involved with the assassination of Dr. King, or John Kennedy or Bobby Kennedy, those times back from the 60s, we're still waiting for answers, and we still would like to know what happened that day and why.
I know you've also said that you still believe the American government is just as dishonest with the American people today as it was then. Considering the state of students' minds, you talk to students on a regular basis, and what you think about the government, do you think anything like this could ever happen again?
I don't think anything like May 4th could happen again. Crowd control has advanced a lot with respect to rubber bullets and things like that, but something I heard one of the other days ago at a symposium here at the university I can't attribute the statement to its author, I'm sorry about that, but what I did hear is that an inert citizenry is a danger to democracy. And I'm afraid that 30 years later, we've become a very complacent citizenry with respect to public affairs. And that includes America's students, who are not nearly as vocal as they need to be about issues of the day.
Robbie Stamps, this comes from a man who was a boy when that shooting happened. I grew up there in Akron, next door to Kent. I'm very glad that you're here to talk with us this morning. Thanks so much and take care.
Thank you so much.
Also in the news this morning, we've got some fresh videotape in from the island of Vieques off the coast of Puerto Rico.